The Ron Paul channel. A Nevada mother makes her voice heard at a county government meeting. Her speech has now been viewed around the world by thousands of people. Hear why she feels every American's rights are at risk. Thanks for joining us today. If you've ever felt one person can't make a difference, you're about to meet a woman who will change your mind. Let's go to Diana Alvear for more details. Diana, good to see you today.
Hey, Ron, good to see you, too. You're going to love this one. Daphne Lee is a Nevada mother who was forced to wait nearly 8 hours at a county government meeting to voice her opinion. She wanted to speak against the National Defense Authorization Act. It was a nearly empty room at the time when she finally got her chance to speak. But now thousands have watched her speech online.
The National Defense Authorization Act that was passed December 31st, 2011, enacted they were carefully, deceptively worded provisions that were tucked into an enormous military budgetary bill, signed into law quietly on New Year's Eve, and it codifies for the first time in our nation's history the indefinite detention of any person merely suspected, not convicted, of committing a belligerent act against our government, including United States citizens, far from any battlefield. Now, I'm going to tell you, the laws of war do not and cannot coexist with our Bill of Rights. It's not possible. I mean, all you have to do is look through history. When you grant this kind of a power to the executive branch, which was never supposed to happen this way, we're all scared, okay, terrorism. Now we're like giving up all of our rights. I'm just a mom, okay? I'm not gaining anything by doing this. I'm just a mom.
Now people are starting to pay attention. So, Ron, I'm wondering, what do you think of what she's accomplished? Just one person with one speech.
Well, I think it's magnificent, and I always love to hear stories like this. I've gone through this myself once in a while. When they think they're excluding you, they're actually giving you a benefit. I voted a few times by myself in Congress, and instead of it being ridicule, it was usually held in high esteem because I would stand up to somebody. But for her to sit for 8 hours and wait it out, I have to tell you, I'd have been pretty restless on that. So I think that's determination and strong beliefs, and it's just delightful what she's doing. But the issue is so important. This NDAA is such a terrible change in our law. I call it an enabling act, which was the horrible law that gave Hitler so much power. Doesn't mean that we have Hitler today, but it means that there's potential in there where you can make these arrests, and that's what we're going to be talking about, on how much power has been given. And, the other thing that I'm going to caution everybody about is the incrementalism that occurs in Washington, everything that we do. But we only give up a little bit of our liberties, a little bit here, and this was said so often after, 9/11. Well, you have to give up a little bit of your liberties. Yes, and it just keeps growing and growing. But she's caught on, and quite frankly, I think she did a pretty darn good job on that speech, because I've given speeches similar to that, but I think she delivers them quite well, if not better than what I can do.
Quite heartfelt. Well, Daphne Lee is with us today to tell us in her own words why she felt it was so important to speak up that day. She's a member of People Against the National Defense Authorization Act in Nevada, and she happens to be a big fan of yours, Ron. So back to you for your conversation.
Welcome, Daphne. Good to see you today. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. Thank you very much for having me.
Congratulations. Are you surprised that your speech has traveled around the world and so many people are listening to you?
I am. Who knew one public comment would be seen by so many people? It's amazing.
This is a good example that, truth sometimes wins out more so than we ever dream it will. And I think that's what you did. You were speaking truth to power, and people are begging and pleading for it. So I'm just delighted that you have been involved, and I understand you've been involved just in recent years, that you got fascinated with this. I can remember very well the last campaign when this subject came up, because it was in the middle of the campaign that this bill was passed in December of 2011. So I guess you can recall that period of time as well.
Yes, it was actually watching you speak about it on the floor that inspired me to get involved. I was actually in Tampa with the Nevada convention delegates for the Republican convention, and I went to the Ron Paul Festival, and that's where I met Dan Johnson, the young activist who founded PANDA, and I signed up right then and there, and he contacted me, and away we went. We've been trying to fight the indefinite detention provisions here in Nevada for over a year. We were working on the state level. We did have a bill that was strongly supported by 16 co-sponsors. Unfortunately, as you know, one person can block a bill, a good bill, and that's what happened with our state bill. And so then we went to the city and county commissions. The Las Vegas City Council did pass this resolution back in March, and it was tabled by the county. It's not as strong as PANDA would like it to be. It was modeled after the San Francisco legislation, which is a non-compliance. There are stronger resolutions out there. Albany, New York. There was a couple, Webster, Massachusetts, that just passed PANDA's stronger resolution that does a little bit more. So our goal is to get this passed here at the county commission and then strengthen it hopefully with a sheriff resolution or a state bill in the next session.
Now, when you went back home after you were inspired to do something, did you have the organization in Nevada already, or did you have to start a new chapter out there?
Dan called me about a month after Tampa and asked me if I would be willing to head the Southern Nevada chapter, and I did. And I got in contact with the state director at the time, Christopher Corbett, up in the north. And the two of us together worked and built coalition teams. We had Liberty groups that we could coalesce with and just got right to work. We were under a deadline because our legislature only meets every other year. And so we had to quickly get a bill submitted, and we were lucky enough to have a senator take the bill for us. So our main focus in the beginning was working at the state level. We were hoping to just knock it out of the park and get Nevada done in one stroke. But unfortunately, like I said, one senator would not allow it to be heard in committee. And so then we had to move on to the local communities, which is what we've been working on the last few months.
Now, another reason why I like this issue is it's another example, and I keep finding new ones all the time, of bringing people together. And you've heard me say so often that if you understand liberty, you bring all groups together and people get to use their liberty as they choose. So this is an issue that probably isn't strictly conservative Republicans, because that might be a group you have to work on. But if they're conservative in an honest way and a constitutionalist, they're open to this. But you also have an opening to the more liberal progressive groups. Have you found that out to be that you have some people coming from across the political spectrum?
Absolutely. This is a nonpartisan issue. Our organization is nonpartisan. Right now, the county commission board that I'm asking to pass this resolution is all Democratic. And so it's something that reaches across party lines. And I've been able to speak at Republican meetings, at Tea Party meetings. I've spoken with liberal groups. So it's something that crosses across all political spectrums, and it brings people together, because I think at the end of the day, everyone can agree on protecting civil liberties.
Right. Now, when you said you heard my speech on the floor, and I talked about this and tried to warn the people about what it was all about, prior to that, where were you politically? Were you not too interested, or were you sort of thinking about these things and this sort of confirmed your thoughts? Or just how did that come about?
Well, I've been a registered Republican since I was 18, and I thought before last year's election cycle that I was paying my civic duty by watching the news and reading the newspaper and voting in every election. But once I got involved last year here in Nevada with your campaign, it was the first time I actually learned how to go. I helped run our caucus. I went to the county convention, the state convention, and like I said, I went to support our delegates at the national convention, and I learned a lot through that process. The average citizen doesn't know how much further it goes, and once you go and get engaged at your central committee meetings and you go through the process, you realize, for me anyways, I realized how deep the corruption was. And it made me realize I need to get involved and be more involved with local politics. It is that important. Voting's not enough.
Well, right. You know, the organization is one thing, and what you're doing, I think, is great. There's also the big issue, and that's what motivates us, and I understand it motivates you, and what this really means. I mean, there's a lot of significance to this about arresting American citizens and all. But, you know, I sort of had an awakening to this as well on where we stood politically. Because it was during that campaign, I didn't all of a sudden, you know, although I talked about it in Washington and tried to warn people, but, you know, even in the middle of that campaign, I didn't always volunteer this. It wasn't part of every speech. It actually came from the audience. So people, in spite of me not having talked about it a whole lot, there were a lot of people that were very much aware about it and very concerned about this. So I was delighted with that. So when people finally, when you're talking to friends that might not be very interested, and you tell them, you know, this is what it does, do they look at you and say, hey, this can't be true, I don't believe that, or do their eyes open up? Or just, what are the reactions when you try to get this message out?
I mean, when I began in the very beginning, I would go out and try to educate people, and I was met with a lot of people who were just in disbelief. They just didn't believe it was true. And once you show people through educating them and linking the bill and showing them it's an actual bill and you can read it for yourself, that's when people started waking up. And here locally, it's hard because I still have congressmen that tell their constituents that this doesn't apply to United States citizens. So I'm kind of working against the grain sometimes against our political leaders here in Nevada. I got to speak to your son this summer. He came to a Republican town hall, and I got to speak to him regarding this issue in front of a lot of state legislators and in front of Congressman Heck, who still tells all of his constituents that this is nothing to worry about, it doesn't cover U.S. citizens. And it was a really great moment because I asked your son about it specifically in front of all these people, and he confirmed in front of all of them that this is an ongoing situation. They have tried to put forth amendments that would have corrected it, but we've been unsuccessful, and that I should continue my efforts at the local level in the meantime. And he said this in front of our congressman, and I wanted to follow up with Congressman Heck because he has the strong stance that it doesn't cover U.S. citizens. But unfortunately, he was nowhere to be found after I asked that question to Senator Paul.
You know, one thing that I've gotten, and I imagine you have already yourself, people, when they hear you speak and talk about this, they'll say, well, you don't care about our national defense. You're weak on security. And they'll even imply that you're un-American because you're not willing to defend this country. Have you had a little bit of that, and you've had to answer back that I have to give them a different answer to that?
Actually, no. You know, I think people, if they do understand it, that's not one of the reasons. Nobody has supported it if they understand it in light of national defense. I think people understand if they grasp the concept that giving up the very basic principles of liberty that this country is founded on is not a good idea just for the sake of security. So that I haven't seen anybody say that, you know, so far. I mean, I'm sure there's probably people out there that believe that. I believe that Senator Graham and Senator McCain strongly believe that they're protecting us by, you know, infringing on our liberties. But it's very dangerous to think that if we give up all of our liberties that we're going to be safer. And I just don't think Americans, if they really understood it, would agree with that stance.
You know, the one principle in a free society is that if the higher level of government abuse their power, the lower level of government should represent the people and resist that abuse. In that sense, you know, your city governments, your county governments, and your police forces and the judicial system should always be protecting the people against abuse of power. Now, in this case, the frustration that you felt was, you know, they're not jumping up and down and your local officials aren't saying, hey, look, this is bad legislation. They're going to come and make me enforce some of these laws, and they're going to arrest people and haul off people and not give them a trial. So it's sort of sad that happens, but in many ways, though, you're, you know, putting the pressure on the right places because I think the officials are negligent. Did you find this to be the case at the, you had some support at the state level when you had legislation, but what about at the city level? It passed rather easily, didn't it?
Yeah, the city level it passed rather easily. We didn't have any problems. We were actually surprised how easy it passed. The mayor in particular, I really love her, Mayor Goodman. She spoke very strongly, vocally, about how important this was. And so I thought that it should be a no-brainer when it went over to the county. Unfortunately, there's background politics going on here, and as you know, Senator Reed is a very powerful senator here in our state, and he has very strong a voice in the Democratic caucus throughout the state. And with that being said, I think that there's probably fear politically for people to come out and take a stand on this because he has such influence over who and who will not be important in our state. And because it should be a no-brainer. That if you read the resolution, it's just reaffirming rights of due process. And it just astounds me sometimes that this has been such a battle for me. But I think that it's going to take some courage on the part of the county commissioners, even though our state senator probably doesn't care for the idea of this resolution very much since he voted for it. They're going to have to take courage and stand against him on this issue because it's that important. And I really hope that they do. So we'll find out December 17th. They have said that they're going to take a vote on it.
You know, and the other issue that you'll have to face up to, and you may realize this already, is the principle of incrementalism. You know, incrementalism, they start little, and you don't hear much about it. It's all in the books. They're not using it. Why worry about it? You're worrying too much. Yes, they've assassinated a couple Americans, and there's been some arrests, and they haven't had due process. But most people haven't heard about it, and they don't care. It's not going to happen. But tyranny comes incrementally. It usually doesn't come from a true free Republican. With the snap of a finger, all of a sudden, the people endorse the tyrants. It doesn't happen that way. And it'll be different in this country as well, because I think we're not going to, even though some people suspect we're going to have a tyrant just take over and declare dictatorship, I think it's just going to be that we'll keep re-electing a dictator and giving him these powers, because there's been a transition, you know, from the Bush years to the Obama years, and you haven't seen the repeals of any of this legislation. So that's one thing that you might run into. I don't know whether you've run into that yet or not, but it's something that we have to be aware of.
Yeah, I think people need to understand that it all trickles down to their local governments. For instance, the drones being brought here, the domestic drone program. It was a federal law that was passed in 2012 to integrate domestic drones into our airspace. And I was actually at a county commission meeting where they proposed a resolution, and it passed without the blink of an eye. They're actually lobbying for the domestic drone pilot program to be brought here to Nevada. So I think that if people got more involved with their local governments, they would see that they could stop some of this national incrementalization that you're talking about, because it trickles down all the way to your local governments. And if we have put in place a watchdog group taking care and watching the agendas of the city councils and the county commissions, then maybe we could stop some of this. It just takes a handful of citizens to start voicing dissent to make a difference.
Could you tell their listeners what they might be able to do to help out on that project?
Absolutely. You can email the Clark County Commissioners on their website at just Google Clark County Commission, and each of their contact information is on that website. Please, I encourage you to email them and express your concern regarding this and encourage them to support this resolution.
Well, Daphne, I want to thank you very much for being on the program, and I'm sure I don't need to encourage you. I think you're going to stay active. Like I've indicated in speeches, you don't have any choice. Once you become aware of this and you get involved, it'd be a lot harder talking you out of this than to talk you into continuing this. But once again, it's another example of an individual like yourself deciding to do something and not waiting for instructions on what to do. I don't believe in this. You know, even our campaign was a little bit disorganized in the sense that it was mostly spontaneous at the grassroots level. Even our fundraising was this way. So So you're an example of what we like to emphasize, and the most important thing you're doing there is telling the truth and getting the truth out there and waking people up, because nothing will happen in this country, nothing will happen economically or on foreign policy or civil liberties until there are a lot more people like you making this message. And this is where I'm really encouraged and have been, over the last 5 years or so, with people like you who have become energized and you find something to do. So congratulations, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul. People can go to our website, pandaunite.org, and get involved in their own local cities. And I appreciate you having me on today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daphne, for being with us today. I thought it was a great interview and very helpful. I know our listeners will be very impressed with all your work. But to me, it's such an important issue, and you're such a great example of what one person can do. And emphasizing the importance of education, letting people know what's happening, but also being an activist and understanding the philosophy and the dangers. So you've put it together rather well, and I think that your work will continue, and you've done a great job already, so keep up the good work. And the American people have to do exactly the same thing. We have to know when our government's attacking us, even though it seems to be subtle, our civil liberties, our economic liberties, are doing things overseas they shouldn't be doing, because ultimately, if the people wake up, they'll do the right things. And we do have this opportunity now to spread our message. It's been difficult in the past to spread the message of liberty, but now that we have the internet and we have young people responding the way we have seen in these last several years, and we have the Ron Paul channel to help get this information out, believe me, we can have an impact. So I want to thank the listeners for tuning in, and get back with us soon.
One day, somebody's going to have to say enough.